My wife's name is Jessica, and what you're about to hear will leave you absolutely shocked. 6 years ago, when we first met, life was still full of promise and excitement. Jessica was magnetic, sharp, ambitious, and always in control. Whenever she walked into a room, it felt like the air shifted. People gravitated toward her like moths to a flame, desperate for a moment in her spotlight. And me? I was the quiet guy. I had a knack for coding, was decent with people, and completely hopeless when it came to remembering important dates, like my dad's birthday. But somehow Jessica picked me. She used to tell me she loved how steady I was. At the time, it felt like a compliment, but in hindsight, I wonder if it was her way of saying I was boring. When we got married, life was simple, maybe even easy. I had my job in coding, a field where the hardest part is convincing people you're not a robot, and Jessica had a fancy corporate job that came with a shiny graduate degree. She thrived on managing people and loved being part of what I called the corporate labyrinth. I, on the other hand, always joked that middle managers were just roadblocks in suits. We'd laugh about our differences. She'd call my work soulless, while defending hers as the glue that holds society together. For a while, we struck the perfect balance. We'd cook dinner together, binge-watch crime dramas, and argue about whose turn it was to take out the trash. Life felt solid, but then the lockdowns hit and everything started to change. Let me tell you something. Being stuck in close quarters with your spouse 24/7 can turn even the strongest marriage into a survival challenge. Suddenly, we weren't just partners, we were co-workers sharing a tiny house and one bathroom. To keep some sense of normalcy, we turned the spare bedrooms into home offices. I'd still wake up early, shower, shave, and put on a suit every morning, even though the only ones who saw me were Jessica and our cat. Jessica, on the other hand, would roll out of bed, throw on sweatpants, and start answering emails while scrolling Instagram or playing Candy Crush. At first, we laughed about how differently we were handling things, but pretty soon, the laughter turned into jabs. "Oh, look at you, Mr. Professional," she'd say with a smirk. Or worse, "Do you really need to shut the door for a 15-minute meeting? What are you hiding?" I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just stress. But the truth was we were becoming strangers. The house felt less like a home and more like two people splitting a mortgage. Jessica came home late again. She walked in like nothing had happened, her purse slung over her shoulder and a calm, indifferent look on her face. It was like she'd stepped off the set of some romantic drama, completely detached from reality. She barely looked my way and said something casual like, "Don't wait up till," or "busy day at work." But this time, I wasn't letting it slide. I turned to her and said, "Hope your little networking sessions with Damien are worth it." She froze. For just a second, her mask slipped. Her eyes widened slightly, and I saw a flicker of panic. Then her face hardened, and her voice came out cold and sharp. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, don't play dumb, Jessica," I said, locking eyes with her. "I saw the messages, the photos, the videos. Did you really think I wouldn't check the iPad before wiping it?" Her expression turned icy, and then to my shock, she laughed. She actually laughed. "You think you're going to leave me?" she sneered, her tone dripping with contempt. That's when I realized the woman standing in front of me wasn't the Jessica I thought I'd married. This was someone else entirely. "Ethan, honey, you're a joke if you think you can," Jessica said, her voice dripping with contempt. She leaned against the kitchen counter like she was delivering a rehearsed monologue. "Let me spell it out for you. If you try to leave, I'll get half of everything, your paycheck, your savings, even this house. You'll be left with nothing but that dusty old computer of yours." The jab about the computer? That one stung. I mean, come on, I had a brand new MacBook, and she knew it. But Jessica wasn't done. She smirked and added, "Face it, you're stuck with me. At least if you stay, you'll get something out of it. Occasionally." Occasionally. That word hit me like a slap in the face. She said it like she was throwing scraps to a dog, even throwing in a snide remark about intimacy, but only if I was a good boy. I just stood there, frozen, too stunned to speak, while she smirked like she'd just won some twisted power struggle. Then she walked off to bed, leaving me standing in the kitchen, my hands clenched into fists. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my office, staring at the walls, replaying her words over and over. Occasionally, the woman I married was gone, replaced by someone cruel, calculating, and unrecognizable. By morning, I was done. I picked up my phone, called my lawyer, and said, "File the papers and make it loud." Now, when I said make it loud, I didn't just mean filing for divorce. No, I wanted Jessica to feel the weight of her betrayal. I wanted her to experience every ounce of humiliation and heartbreak she'd inflicted on me, served right back on a silver platter. My lawyer, bless him, tried to reason with me. "Ethan," he said, his tone cautious, "judges don't have a sense of humor. Revenge might feel good now, but it could hurt you in the long run. Are you sure you want to do this?" "Absolutely," I said, without hesitation. "I'm not just filing for divorce. I'm making a statement." And that's when the cake idea was born. I didn't even know it was possible to get a custom image printed on a cake until my lawyer's assistant mentioned it as a joke. But once the idea took root, there was no turning back. I placed a rush order for the most obnoxiously large, over-the-top cake I could get my hands on. On top of it, Monica and Damien's most incriminating photo, printed in perfect edible detail. Above the photo, the icing read, "Here's your cake, eat it." But I wasn't going to stop there. I arranged for the cake and the divorce papers to be delivered straight to Jessica's office. The process server deserves an award for what he did. He didn't just deliver the papers, he put on a show. According to him, Jessica was laughing with a group of coworkers when he walked into her office holding the giant cake box. "Are you Jessica?" he asked loudly, making sure everyone nearby could hear. "Yes," she replied, looking confused. That's when he opened the box, revealing the masterpiece inside. Jessica's face went from confused to mortified in an instant. Then, with perfect timing, the process server set the divorce papers on the table beside the cake and said, "You've been served." What happened next? Oh, it was glorious. Jessica let out this ear-piercing screech, like a banshee had just flown into the room. She lunged at the cake and knocked it off the table, but it landed face up on the carpet, the photo still perfectly visible for everyone to see. Her co-workers? Half of them were too stunned to react. The other half started whispering immediately, and from what I heard, one of them actually laughed. Someone in the back even yelled, "Finally something sweet!" The image of Jessica standing there, humiliated, with that cake on the floor and everyone staring at her, it was everything I'd hoped for, and it was only the beginning. "God, that's a sign because I'm so sick of this diet." That was what one of Jessica's co-workers said after seeing the cake, completely oblivious to the drama unfolding. Damien, the boss/lover, was apparently there too. According to the process server, Damien's face went pale as a ghost. He grabbed his things and bolted out of the room without saying a word. Meanwhile, my phone started blowing up. Calls, texts, voicemails, all from Jessica. "How could you do this to me?" she screamed in one of the messages. I didn't reply. I didn't even bother listening to the rest. I forwarded everything to my lawyer and let her stew in the mess she had made. She didn't come home that night. Instead, her mom texted me. "Jessica will be staying with me for now," she wrote. Honestly, I slept better that night than I had in months. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't on edge, waiting for the next sarcastic jab or passive-aggressive comment. But before we dive into what happens next, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. The next couple of days were blissfully quiet. Radio silence. Jessica was holed up at her mom's place. And the house? It was peaceful. Calm. For the first time in ages, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells in my own home. I could sit in my kitchen, sip my coffee, and not worry about Jessica's judging eyes watching me from across the room. But of course, the peace didn't last long. On Saturday morning, I got a text from her. "We need to talk. About us." Sure. Us. As if there was still an us left to talk about. I didn't call her. Instead, I emailed her back. Lawyer's advice, of course. "We can talk," I wrote. "But it's either in my lawyer's office with your lawyer present, or here with witnesses and everything recorded." To my surprise, she agreed. No pushback, no stalling, no arguing, just a simple, okay? Weird. I figured she'd try to manipulate the situation or guilt-trip me, but nope. So I called up Mike and Amber, two mutual friends who'd seen it all, the good, the bad, and the ugly. They knew what was going on, and they were more than happy to help. They came over that afternoon, and we set up our phones to record everything, placing them right on the kitchen table. Jessica showed up not long after, walking in like nothing had happened, like this wasn't a meeting about her cheating on me and destroying our marriage. She even tried to hug me. I held up my hand and said, "Let's skip the theatrics and get to it." At first she cried, big dramatic crocodile tears. She apologized, saying she'd been lost and didn't know how to fix things. I just sat there, stone-faced, watching her performance. Then came stage 2, the blame game. "You were never there for me, Ethan," she said, her voice shaking. "You locked yourself in your office all day and ignored me. We weren't even acting like a couple anymore. It felt like I was married to a roommate." She was laying it on thick, trying to paint herself as the victim. I sat there, biting my tongue so hard it's a miracle I didn't bleed. And then she hit me with her ace card, the line she thought would break me. "You know you'll lose everything if you go through with this, right?" she said, her tone suddenly cold and sharp. "Half your paycheck, the house, everything. Judges love women in these cases." There it was, the real Jessica, bold as day. "You'll be drowning in debt while I move on," Jessica sneered, crossing her arms. "Maybe you should think about how this is going to look. For you." I couldn't help it. I laughed. "Oh, you're right, Jessica," I said, chuckling as I leaned back in my chair. "This is going to look awful. For you." That wiped the smirk off her face. She blinked, stunned, as if she hadn't expected me to push back. But Jessica, being Jessica, switched gears. Again. "We can fix this, Ethan," she said, her voice suddenly soft and pleading. "We just need time. We were happy once. Don't throw that away." I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. "Jessica," I said evenly, "there's nothing left to fix. We ended the second you decided to screw Damien." Her jaw tightened, but I wasn't finished. "You want my advice? Get yourself a lawyer, and maybe start thinking about how you're going to handle those coworkers who are blackmailing you." "Yeah," I added, watching her eyes widen. "I know about that too. Good luck." For the first time in this entire disaster, she looked genuinely scared. Her face went pale, and for a second, I thought she might actually break. But because Jessica just couldn't help herself, she threw one last jab as she stood up. "You'll regret this, Ethan," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You'll never find anyone better than me." I smiled and leaned back in my chair. "Guess we'll see, won't we?" She stormed out, slamming the door behind her, leaving the house ringing with the sound of her exit. The moment she was gone, I knew I couldn't sit around waiting for her next move. My lawyer had been clear. Protect yourself first. Emotions come later. Finances come now. First order of business? The savings. I opened a new account in my name and moved half of everything over. No sneaky tricks, no underhanded moves, just common sense. Then I froze my credit, ensuring she couldn't open any accounts in my name. Anything joint that I could separate without her signature? I handled it immediately. Subscriptions changed, utilities transferred, mortgage autopay adjusted. The house, though, that was the tricky part. It was technically our house, but there was still a good chunk of the mortgage left to pay off. My lawyer warned me that Jessica would likely fight for it, whether to live in it or just to spite me. And honestly, I wasn't ready to let it go. This house wasn't just some property to me, it was my project, my sanctuary. I'd put so much time into making it my own. The thought of Jessica turning it into some kind of trophy for her victories? Unbearable. So I started exploring my options. Could I refinance in my name alone? Would selling and cutting my losses make more sense? My lawyer advised me to play it cool for now. And here's the thing. Jessica didn't seem to have an angle, at least not yet. She was too busy dealing with the fallout from the office drama. Turns out, my little cake stunt was the gift that kept on giving. Word of what happened spread fast at her workplace. Damien, her boss/lover, immediately shut the affair down. He told her to only communicate with him on business matters from that point forward. Whatever fantasy Jessica and Damien had been living, it crumbled as fast as that cake hit the office floor. From what I heard, Damien wasn't just avoiding Jessica, he was practically sprinting in the opposite direction. He refused to be in the same room as her, and as for her so-called work friends, the ones who had egged her on during her little affair, they turned on her faster than a bad soap opera plot twist. Apparently one of them even started calling her Cake Girl behind her back. Ouch! The pressure was too much for her. HR didn't officially step in, but everyone knew the writing was on the wall. The whispers, the looks, the snickers. It was all easier for her bosses to ignore if Jessica just disappeared. By the end of the week, she quit. She told people it was to focus on her personal life. But we all know that's code for I couldn't take the heat. Now she was jobless, friendless, and from what I could tell, completely overwhelmed. Jessica had no time to prepare for the divorce because she was too busy scrambling to put out the fires in her own life. Meanwhile, I was staying busy in my own way. I started consolidating my assets, making moves, and planning for what life would look like after the dust settled. I even started therapy, not just to deal with the chaos Jessica had left behind, but to make sure I wasn't lugging any of that emotional baggage into my next chapter. Let me tell you something. Going to court for a divorce feels less like a legal proceeding and more like a boxing match where the referee secretly hopes you both knock each other out. Jessica strutted into the courtroom like she was auditioning for a legal drama, hair perfectly styled, heels clicking on the floor like she owned the place. Me? I showed up in a clean shirt, armed with the quiet confidence of a man holding all the receipts. My lawyer? A shark. Jessica genuinely thought she had this in the bag. She walked in like she was about to waltz out with half of everything I owned. But surprise, surprise, that's not how it works when you're the one who torpedoed the marriage. Thanks to the evidence we'd collected, the judge ruled that Jessica wasn't entitled to spousal support. That's right. No alimony for Jessica. Zip, zero, nada, and thank God for that. To this day, I still don't understand who came up with the concept of spousal support. Luckily, we didn't have kids, otherwise this could have been a much bigger mess. But Jessica did get a claim on the house. Turns out, even if someone cheats, they can still get a slice of the property if their name is on the deed. Here's the kicker, though. The judge took all my financial documentation into account when calculating her share. I'd spent months gathering proof of my contributions to the house. Every little dollar accounted for. Jessica walked into that courtroom expecting to walk out with 50% of everything. Instead, she got significantly less. I made her an offer to pay out her portion of the house, and the judge approved it. Jessica? She didn't argue. She agreed without hesitation. Why? Because she knew she could lose even more if she fought back. When it was all said and done, Jessica's lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Jessica? She looked like she'd just been handed a participation trophy at the Olympics. She muttered something under her breath about the court being biased. Biased? Against cheaters? Imagine that. A few days later, Jessica came by to pack up her things. Let me tell you, watching Jessica pack her things was like a live taping of a bad reality TV show. She strolled through the house like she was saying goodbye to an old friend, or maybe just scouting for loose change. "Oh, Ethan," she said, her voice dripping with fake sincerity. "This doesn't have to be the end, you know. We've been through so much, maybe we could—" "Nope," I said, cutting her off mid-sentence. "But, nope," I repeated, this time with a smile. She sighed dramatically and flopped onto the couch like a soap opera star mid-meltdown. "We could at least stay friends," she said, giving me her best puppy dog eyes. "You know, for old time's sake." I laughed. "Friends, Jessica, friends don't cheat." She tried another angle, of course. "We had some good times, didn't we? You were always so stable, so reliable." "Right, stable." I leaned against the doorframe and looked at her. "Yeah, I was steady, wasn't I? That's what you always called me." "Well, Jessica, steady doesn't mean doormat." And then came the tears. Oh, the tears. If I'd bottled them, I could have ended California's drought. She begged for a second chance, swore she was a different person now, claimed she'd learned from her mistakes. "Jessica," I said calmly, still leaning against the doorframe, "you're not a different person. You're just out of options, and I'm fresh out of patience." When she finally left, dragging her suitcase behind her, I closed the door and let out the biggest sigh of relief. It felt like I just won the championship game of my life. The house was mine. My finances were safe. And Jessica, she was someone else's problem now. I figured she'd move on, maybe find another Damien or two to wreak havoc on. But no. Jessica, ever the queen of reinvention, decided to become a relationship blogger. Yeah, you heard that right. My ex-wife, who single-handedly turned our marriage into a bad soap opera, suddenly had the audacity to dish out relationship advice to the masses. Her blog was called something ridiculous, like Lessons from a Love Survivor. It was full of posts with titles like Why Men Are the Problem and How to Spot a Steady Guy Before He Drags You Down. She didn't name me directly, of course, but her ex sounded a little too familiar. She painted herself as the misunderstood victim of a cold, unfeeling husband who schemed his way out of a fair divorce. One day, while I was procrastinating online, I stumbled across one of her vlogs, a 10-minute rant titled, How to Recover After Being Gaslit by a Tech Bro. Guess who the tech bro was? Listening to her rant about my scheming was like watching someone describe a cartoon villain from a bad Lifetime movie. It was laughable. So I did what any sane person would do. I called her. "Jessica, can you not?" I said as soon as she answered. "Oh, Ethan," she replied, her voice dripping with that signature fake innocence. "I'm just sharing my truth." "You wouldn't want to silence me, would you?" Jessica said, her voice dripping with faux innocence. "You're not sharing truth," I snapped. "You're sharing bad fan fiction," she huffed, clearly annoyed. "Well, maybe if you hadn't swindled me out of my rightful share of the house, I wouldn't have to make my living this way." I hung up before I could say something that would completely ruin my karma, but that's when inspiration struck. If Jessica wanted drama, I was more than happy to deliver, with frosting on top. Every 2 weeks, like clockwork, Jessica started receiving cakes. Big, beautiful cakes with custom images printed right on top. The first one? A masterpiece. It featured me lounging by the pool, cocktail in hand, with the words, "Life's great. Thanks for asking," piped across the top in bright, cheerful letters. The second cake? Me, standing next to the deed to the house, grinning ear to ear. The icing read, "Home Sweet Home," in elegant script. Each cake was delivered by a driver I tipped extra to film her reaction. And let me tell you, those reactions were priceless. At first, Jessica thought the cakes were gifts from subscribers or friends. But when she opened each box, the realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Her face would turn beet red as she screamed, slammed the lid shut, or, in one unforgettable moment, hurled the entire cake into her front yard while shouting, "This is harassment!" She even went on her socials to complain, posting pictures of the ruined cakes with dramatic captions about how her crazy ex was stalking her. But instead of sympathy, people were either laughing at her or asking for the bakery's contact info. The real masterpiece, though, was the video I put together. I called it Karen versus the Cakes. It showed Jessica's most dramatic reactions, all set to overly dramatic classical music. Her screaming, fist-shaking, and over-the-top tantrums made the perfect highlight reel. When I posted it online and tagged her, it went viral. The internet ate it up, and Jessica's antics became a running joke. The next morning, my phone buzzed. It was Jessica. "Ethan, this has to stop," she said, sounding more defeated than I'd ever heard her. "You're humiliating me." "Oh, you mean like when you humiliated me in your blog?" I replied, savoring the irony. She groaned, clearly realizing the tables had turned. "Fine, I'll stop mentioning you. I'll even take down the old posts. Just stop with the cakes." "Deal," I said, barely hiding my grin. And just like that, we reached an uneasy truce. No more cakes, no more blogs about gaslit tech bros. We went our separate ways for good. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Wishing you a great mood and all the best.